Electric cars, often hailed as the future of motoring, but there's plenty of misconceptions around them, charging, range, and driving across Europe. But I decided to put this to the ultimate test and took an electric car all the way from here in the United Kingdom to Germany's Black Forest, a journey of over 450 miles. And this is the car I chose, the Genesis GV70 Electrified. 4 adults, a child, and a boot full of luggage. This was always going to be hard. How hard was it exactly?
Oh, Father, tell me, do we get what we deserve? Oh, we get what we deserve. And where down we go, oh, 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 where down we go, oh, 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 so where down we go, oh, 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 way down we go.
But it wasn't without its challenges. Freezing temperatures, range challenges, and charging troubles. We had a lot to learn. But I feel after this journey I've learnt so much about what is possible with EVs today. And here's what I found out. Before we dive into this journey, let's learn a little bit more about what this car is. The Genesis GV70 Electrified is a very impressive vehicle, with over 280 miles claimed range, huge interior space and a nice big boot. It surely would make the perfect car to do this journey. But as we found, the cold temperatures plummeted that range to under 200 miles, meaning we had to charge 3 times. And that wasn't without its issues. I've taken an electric car to Europe once before. This time was no exception. I didn't do any forward planning. I just drove blindly into Europe, expecting to find rows and rows of chargers like we did in France. Unfortunately, that wasn't exactly the case. We first stopped at the charger in Holland and we found that there was no card readers on the machine, so it wasn't a tap and go machine. Nightmare. You have to download an app. The app didn't exist on our phones. You can't download it on iOS, so we would have been stuffed. Thankfully, however, the machine was being worked on. There was an engineer there fitting card readers to the machines. He then was able to start the charging remotely, and it was free, so even better. But if he hadn't been there, there'd have been no chance. We wouldn't have been able to get charging the car. And that was just the first of a series of problems as we ventured further into Europe. Going into Germany was more or less the same thing. I can't even remember the brand of the charger, but it just didn't work. You couldn't download the app, you couldn't use your card, and yeah, it didn't work. And if you were lucky, there was 2 of them. It was just generally a nightmare. We kept moving on to the next one, trying to look for familiar chargers we've used before, like InstaVolt or IONITY, and we just didn't see any. They were just obscure names, some of them as low as 22 kilowatts. And anyone that's got an electric car knows that when you're on a long journey, 22 kilowatt charging power is simply not good enough. It would take hours to charge the car. What we needed was the 150 kilowatt plus chargers, meaning the car could be charged up in 10-15 minutes. If only we could find one. So on the journey out there, we did manage to get another charge. This was quite far into Germany, and although it was expensive, it worked. It gave the car 100% power. We only had stopped for 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. It was not an issue at all. It was quite expensive though. After that, that's where the problem started. We tried to aim for another charger when the car needed a little bit more to get us to the accommodation in the Black Forest. Bearing in mind the Black Forest is quite rural, there was no chance of finding a charge around there. So we knew we had to go into the Black Forest with a full charge. We couldn't find a charger. We tried 3 separate chargers. Each of them were either you needed the app, you needed a card. We couldn't use them. Absolute nightmare. In the end, we resorted to something that I've never had to do before, which is to pull over and just try to find somewhere where we can charge it. I then remembered that you can actually use the Tesla network. That's open to all electric cars. And although the Genesis doesn't show it on its charging map of which chargers are where, never displays a Tesla one. They're all open, they're all available to use. So I got my Tesla app out, we found one in Hockenheim, we diverted to Hockenheim. Not an ideal situation, but Tesla chargers are pretty much the best chargers you can use. And we got full power into the car and made it fine to our accommodation. During the time there, we didn't really have an issue. There was a charger at the Airbnb itself, and we just didn't have an issue with power. Every time we got into the car, it was full because it had been charging overnight, so it was fantastic. And that's probably my tip for anyone wanting to do this type of journey. If you find somewhere with a charging cable at the other end, it's going to save a lot of headaches. But yeah, we had an interesting, to say the very least, journey to get to the Black Forest. On the way back, however, it was plain sailing. I made 2 massive discoveries and a couple of really key takeaways from this video. If anyone is watching this thinking about taking an EV to Europe, these are the things you need to know. Because on the way back, we had a much simpler time. First of all, I started to look for IONITY chargers. We discovered they were about in Germany, meaning they're 300 kilowatt chargers. They're the fastest chargers you can get. They work. 9 times out of 10, they work. And when I got to one, it wouldn't take my card, and you had to download the app. I had the app, but that wasn't working either. What I then discovered was an app called Electroverse. It's an app I use in the UK. And what that does is it bills your electricity bill at home. So it's from Octopus. If you go out and put 30 or 40 pounds into your electric car, it sends it back to your home bill. It's pretty cool. And Electroverse works all across Germany. And now you can see the revelation I had. Yes, every single one of those chargers that didn't work, if I just opened the Electroverse app, would have. They would have worked. So using Electroverse on the way back, we were able to charge at IONITY a couple of times, and I think we used a Tesla before we set off. But each of the charging occasions was stress-free, was not annoying, and it just worked. So yeah, the return journey was fantastic. It was just getting out there that was the big problem. So, the GV70 Electric. Well, I was never intending to make this a review video, but I can't really talk about the road trip without touching on a few of the things that I found that I really enjoy about the GV70 Electrified, and some of the things that I don't like. So although this is not a review, this is a little bit about this car. And first of all, it's the power. The amount of power this car has, even despite its huge size, means it blows away everything on the road. Particularly useful when coming onto German motorways, as their slip roads are really short, and without a ton of power, you're going to struggle to get out. It makes that type of driving completely effortless. And that's just the same throughout. 700 Newton meters of torque, even in a car this heavy, means it flies up hills effortlessly. It makes driving through the Black Forest and over the high road in the Black Forest just an incredible experience. The level of comfort you get in this car is exceptional. It's something I've never come across in any car other than Genesis, and they are so quiet. So quiet. The seats are like armchairs. They offer levels of comfort I've not come across in any other vehicle. They're simply stunning to drive in, to be a passenger in. Rear legroom is not too bad, and we had our front seats a little bit further forward than we ordinarily would to allow passengers to have more legroom. 4 adults, a child seat in the middle, and a boot full. Yeah, this car did well. Talking about the boot, with this being the electrified version means the boot does suffer. And although it's a fairly big boot, for the size of the car, it's quite low down in its class. When you compare this to something like a Range Rover Sport, the Range Rover Sport has got way more space in the back. That being said, we still got everything in. Packing it in squishy bags and piling it straight up to the roof meant we got everything in. It was just a little bit of a puzzle. And maybe if this was the internal combustion, you'd gain another bit of boot space under there, because when you lift the boot cover up, you can see the motors in there. So they are eating into boot space quite considerably. The other issue is this isn't a bespoke EV. This car is available with an internal combustion engine, meaning that frunk, it's not even a frunk, it can't be even called a frunk. You can barely fit the charging cables in the frunk. So it's not useful at all. And if this was a bespoke EV, And you can pretty much guarantee they would have made a little space in there for that. Yeah, not really what I would consider to be called a frunk. The other thing worth mentioning with this car is it's pretty much packed with all of Genesis's optional upgrades. It's got infotainment upgrades, it's got safety upgrades, it's got everything, all these optional extras. Far too many to list, but we'll put them all in the description below. This car comes in quite expensive, over £70,000, but it's pretty much fully laden with tech. It has full autonomous driving, so it will keep within the lanes, it will change lanes using the indicators, so no steering input needed. It will track the car in front at various distances, all kind of stuff that we've become used to really with modern day EVs and modern day cars. But it takes so much of the stress out of the journey. It's got road sign recognition and the best heads-up display I've ever used in any car. Not only is it super clear, but you can have all your turn-by-turn directions on it, there's signs that it's read along the way, all sorts of really good information. Also shows all the cars that are surrounding you on the motorways, so you can keep track of where everyone is and prevents you from pulling into the path of other cars. And when you are lost and you are on an unfamiliar road in Europe, it's quite easy to make a mistake and not check your mirrors. And by having all these sensors and all these safety features, I mean, you reduce that risk quite considerably. And it does make it very, very easy to drive. In terms of the range, I do believe this car will do a lot more than what I did. We used the heaters, the massaging seat functions, we used everything in the car that's available. I also didn't drive the car particularly efficiently. I'm a strong believer that if you're going to have an EV, you need to drive it pretty much like an internal combustion engine. Otherwise, you're compromising the way you drive. It's not fun to always be thinking about miles per gallon because you don't do that in an internal combustion. So I felt like if I drive this like I do any other car, it would give a more true reflection of the range. I'm not one for turning off the air conditioning to get an extra few miles. I would have everything on, everything running permanently, and pretty much drive it like I do any other car. So I think if you were a little bit more careful, you had a bit higher regen on, yeah, you could definitely eke a little bit more range out of it. But I do feel the range was impacted more by the weight and also the freezing temperatures that we had. So how do I think this compares to something like a Tesla Model Y? Similar kind of size and a similar class of car. A full EV, of course. Well, the Tesla do have the more superior charging network, as I found when driving on the European roads. Teslas have an unmatched charging network. And when you set the destination on a Tesla, it will take you to that destination, but it will also know whether you can make it or not. And if you can't, it will plot in Tesla chargers along the route. Although the Genesis will do that, it wasn't very good, and we had to manually override a lot of the places it wanted to take us. You could be driving hundreds of miles across motorways and it will pull you off, make you do a 5-mile diversion to hook up to a 22 kilowatt charger, which is no use for anyone. So when you compare the Tesla to that, they've got it down to a T. Tesla have Genesis beat when it comes to the charging infrastructure and the ease of use. But that is the only reason I would choose a Tesla over this, because this is better than a Tesla in every single way. Build quality is night and day. It's not even comparable. You can't even compare the two when it comes to build quality. This thing, is no word of a lie, built like a Bentley. It's so much better than a Tesla, it's not even funny. This is one of the best quality cars I've ever driven. Everything's wrapped in lovely, gorgeous, soft leather, and the stitching and everything's just perfect. Genesis have done an incredible job with this, and the Germans, and certainly the Americans, need to be worried about Genesis. The other thing that I love about this car is quite simply the way it looks. Now, it might not be the most attractive car on the road, it's certainly no Porsche, but I think when you look at it, it's an incredibly imposing vehicle, designed like pretty much nothing else on the road. It does have kind of cues towards Bentley, and a lot of people do mistake it for them. But everywhere we've been, and especially in Germany, when it's been parked up, people have been giving it a good look, commenting on it's a beautiful car or it looks really nice. And it really does. It stands out from the rest, but it doesn't look like your everyday EV. And I'm a huge fan of that. So well done, Genesis, on the design of this incredible car. The biggest hurdle was not the car, but it was Germany's charging infrastructure. A charging infrastructure that I expected to be better. It's very similar to the UK in that if you know which brand of charger to aim for, it's perfectly fine, but it's not a patch on France's. And because I experienced France first, I maybe went in a little bit naively, thinking it was going to be a similar situation, and it wasn't. And it made the whole process, certainly getting there, more stressful than it needed to be. In the end, this trip was not about testing out the GV70 Electric. It was more about myth busting and what it's like to use an EV for a long-distance road trip with the family. When you rely on seamless and effective charging, and whether or not you can actually make it to your destination, I think we've proved here that you can. It just needs a little bit of thought and a little bit of planning before you set off for the continent. I went into this completely blind, and I thought that was the best way to approach it. With a petrol car, you don't give much thought when you board the ferry to France or Germany. You just come off the other end, and when you need fuel, you just stop. So I thought to approach it that way was going to be the most fair way to test it. So next time you hear someone doubting EVs and their long-range capability, just remember about what I've managed to do with this GV70. Maybe consider using an EV for your next family trip. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for plenty more videos like this one to come. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a rather different one, and I hope it's given you some information and some advice on what it's like to drive an EV across Europe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Down we go, way down we go, so way down we go.